It gives me as much pleasure to welcome our next keynote speaker, Nigel Snoad, who is the project manager for the Google Crisis Response Project, which is seeking to provide both information and tools to help people collaborate and build resilient communities. Before joining Google last year, he's spent time leading research and development at Microsoft on humanitarian systems, spent time in the United Nations system leading pandemic contingency planning and the Joint Logistics Centre's responses, including in Iraq after the 2004 tsunami and in Darfur. Google, of course, is synonymous with progress through technology, so we're delighted to be here, Nigel. I know that you've both taught and held research fellowships, including at the Santa Fe Institute and Stanford University. We should note that you are also a doctor in complex adaptive systems, so we couldn't be in safer hands, could we? Nigel, welcome.
Hello, everybody. This is my first sort of public speech to a humanitarian audience in my new role at Google. So forgive me if I'm occasionally a bit nervous or not quite sure how I'm going about things. And I'm pretty humble to be able to speak to you all on this topic because my background is not in it. I've been a cheerleader for the things you're working on, and I don't have the field experience. But one of the reasons I joined Google was because watching this kind of thing, for those who recognize it's from Aceh in 2004, and Joel Boutros was giving a very fabulous press conference, but the people in the audience, I think I couldn't actually see a single domestic media outlet there. And that for me was one of the triggers, along with some work that Imogen and various other people had done, to say this is something we have to pay attention to. And so one of the reasons I went and joined Google last year from UNOCHA was to basically grasp the nettle of where the audience was and say, how on earth do we actually start to attack this problem? Now, Google has its own perspectives, and what I wanted to do today was talk a little bit about some of the things we as Google and our crisis response team are learning, understanding, and thinking about. And I'll leave this afternoon for the reports from the field and the real experiences. So take it with the requisite grain of salt, if you like, from a big Western technology company. So I think I can actually turn the slide myself. So just very quickly, I have to do an obligatory statement about our team. Google has, as a part of .org, its charitable work, a crisis response team. And our goal is very much exactly aligned with the CDAC networks, which is to provide information to people affected by crises. So clearly that's easier to do where they have internet, and that's easier to do in places where they're using Google's tools, but we're not limited to that. And this note here says about 30 crises in 2 years, but the team was formally created just around the Haiti earthquake. So there's informal responses. Various companies had done this. I'd done this at Microsoft, for instance, for a couple of years after I first left the UN. And but we work with lots of partners on lots of different ways of providing assistance and information and aid and mapping tools and et cetera, et cetera. But we finally came together around Haiti, and I joined the team, as I said, last year, as we're trying to take it to new levels. And I should, if you like, be sort of sitting here and talking to you about exhorting you to use Google+, which I will, it's great, or how awesome Google Earth is, or Google Maps, and how great MapMaker is despite the FUD that various people are putting out about it, and how we love and support OpenStreetMaps and all these kind of things. But I thought I'd take the chance to really, or about a new product that I was proud to have launched early this year, which is around public alerting, and we'll talk a bit more about that later, potentially. But this is what I used to do, and it doesn't really connect with our audience in the same way. So this is from Haiti. And again, as we all note, this is a captive audience. Everybody knows this, that this is not actually where responses come from for the most part. Right? So what I wanted to talk a bit about was how I'm starting and trying to think, and this is a personal vision, if you like, it's not a Google corporate vision, about how we can empower affected populations to help themselves through information and tools and services, and what some of the trends are. So one of the things you notice everywhere, this is mostly music, but there's in northern Afghanistan, but there's a ton of different cell phone cards. One of the big trends, it's blatantly obvious, is the increasing access to information services and communications technologies. No-brainer. So one of the first things that happened when I met Larry Page after joining Google was he said, I don't want you to think about where the world is today. I want you to think about where the world is going to be in 5 and 10 years' time and build for that. Now, of course, we respond, we have a response team, etc. But the real challenge is to say, okay, well, there are so many opportunities right now, but unfortunately or fortunately, I get the chance to work on something looking forward. And it's where these people and their networks and their mobile phones and their SMS and everything else suddenly accesses the internet. And so I'll talk a bit about what we've seen from internet usage and availability in crises in a second. And I'll try not to take up too much time. And one of the places you might think it could end up, this is a photo of the social media listening center at the American Red Cross in Washington, DC, where they're monitoring Twitter feeds, and it's just been set up. I think they've got a long way to go to actually make use of it. Right? But there are open questions for me about how this kind of stuff comes into everyday practice. I think this is a bit of a show pony at the moment, but it's something that they're starting to figure out how to use. One of the trends, of course, beyond sort of that increasing access to information is, without a doubt, the empowerment of local communities to generate their own tools. Ushahidi is a classic example. Right? So people can serve their own needs and solve their own problems. So the Instead's iLab in Indonesia, in Cambodia, plenty of other examples all over the world. And we work actively as Google with those developer communities. So still trying to figure out what we do there. But perhaps the biggest trend that I see, and it was mentioned earlier by Imogen, was what's called in sort of commercial terms, the consumerization of IT. Professional systems are being replaced by consumer tools. And if you take that trend and you look at how it works, first responders in the US or folks in Haiti are using consumer tools like Google Earth or just everyday cell phones rather than big, expensive, complex systems for doing assessments or custom tools, etc. And the work on the ground isn't a perfect example, because what this means is that the same tools that professionals are using are actually the tools that local communities have access to. And they can iterate on and develop even further. So if I take a mission to Google and our team, it's to say, how can we better enable locals to make use of those tools directly? And effectively a side benefit is the fact that professional responders get better tools as well. Right? And a corollary of that is really that comes from a long-standing principle that everybody should be holding to heart, which is that people use, in a crisis, the tools that they use every day. They use the tools they're most familiar with. They adapt their networks that they're familiar with for the new circumstances. They don't wholeheartedly adopt new systems and processes. So you all know that, but it's worth repeating over and over again in terms of how local populations and responders all make use of technology and tools. So I'll get going quite quickly through the next little bit. But here's a few things that the Google team, before I joined and since, have noticed about crises. And this is globally. Clearly it applies most strongly in Western countries, but it applies, as you'll see, in a bunch of other countries as well, even Haiti. Right? Interestingly enough, the mobile internet often stays up, even more so than mobile SMS systems and phone systems in many cases. Right? So in Christchurch after the earthquake last year, you couldn't send a text message. The delay was something like, I think it was about 3 hours to get a text message through the local network, and you couldn't place a call. But you could access your mobile internet on the phone. It was kind of crazy for that. Now, if you look at future trends, that same kind of distribution is going to go into more and more countries and more places, right? Including having SMS connectivity to those systems as well. So Twitter is a great example. Google Plus is putting SMS in lots of countries, et cetera, right? We know without a doubt, and this is a great thing about working at Google, it's a data and analytics company at heart, right? That people go online for a huge range of information needs. And I've got some compelling case studies of that, right? Really fundamentally believe that open products are key to iterating during a disaster. That closed systems are systems that will be abandoned and left behind. And closed data is data that will be abandoned and left behind and unused. Unsurprisingly, crisis responses are social, and online social response spikes massively. We've got direct trend graphs that shows huge usage of online tools, and not just in the West. Right? So one of my big points that I had in my notes I forgot to make earlier was one of the big trends is Indonesia passed the US in last November in terms of the number of tweets being generated. As a social media using country, Indonesians are phenomenally connected in all the ways that you imagine from the West and all sorts of other different ways. So it makes me think, if I go back to that first slide about Joel Boutreau making a press conference in Aceh, right? That crisis and that disaster of the tsunami in 2004, would have been a very different kind of experience if it had happened today, with the local population being connected in the way they are, with the voice that they have. And I've made the case before in other audiences, but Jan Pronk receiving, as SRSG in the Sudan, receiving a text message from a Darfuri woman in a camp in 2004, which freaked him the hell out. He told them to change his phone number and how dare they, etc. That was just the beginning of a very obvious trend. Right? And we all know this, but giving people an outlet to help is empowering. And I was really struck by Imogen's report from Haiti, which was that it's not just the pure practical, actionable piece of giving people an outlet that matters. It's also, as IFRC had pointed out many times, and our hosts here, a way to give people a sense of justice and empowerment in their actual actions. And the confidence is worth a lot on its own. These are going to be quick. Everybody knows, and I think, that Haiti was a worst-case disaster from a telecommunications point of view. The main line cable to the outside world was cut, all two cables basically. But even so, with the infrastructure destroyed for the most part, even so, you can tell where the earthquake was. This is internet use in Haiti as measured through our edge servers at Google. This is the number of people basically getting online and making queries and all kinds of things. It came back very quickly within 1 to 2 days. And I mean, this might only be a half of what it was pre-earthquake, but I still think that's quite phenomenal. And I use that as a trend, not as an example of the internet's going to save everybody in Port-au-Prince, of course. Right? If you look at Chile after the big earthquake in Santiago in 2010, you had a massive drop-off, but these are daily cycles. Right? So within 2 to 3 days, internet use from Santiago was back up to what it was beforehand. And in New Zealand, in Christchurch, as I said, nothing changed. Despite most of downtown Christchurch and all the cell towers being damaged. Here's another piece of data that's worth sharing. When I say people come online to find things, this is our Google example. Those two spikes are when the Chile and Japan earthquakes happened. And they're queries for people looking for things to do with tsunami in Hawaii the same day. So we're seeing factors of 2,000% change in people looking for relevant terms during an emergency. And this is well after, let alone this day. So more than 20% of all the web queries in Hawaii were about tsunamis, looking for tsunami information. And I'll be frank with you, Google, none of the internet providers had very good information. The number one result across everybody was the Tsunami Museum, right? Which wasn't exactly helpful. So we're fixing that. One of the things, this is a no-brainer for everybody, but this is effectively from various bits of research and user research, we've been able to pull out what people are looking for during crises. It's mostly Western US focused, fine. But we find it applying all over the place. And what's happening, where are the people I care about, and where are the resources I need? It's familiar to everybody here. So one example of an open tool solving a bunch of problems is a team at Google, after the Haiti earthquake, built out Person Finder as a volunteer effort because we wanted to enable citizens to be able to put their information in one place and find it, because we found that there was something like 150 different message boards across the diaspora, across the New York Times, all sorts of locations where everybody was putting the messages of where are my loved ones? And that wasn't even connecting to the efforts on the ground, as we mentioned earlier. So they rapidly built a set of tools with open data standards, and the whole point was that we could get people to share information this way. There are lots of implications, privacy and otherwise, for doing this, of course. But in Japan, there are over 680,000 records entered into Person Finder in the couple of weeks after the earthquake. And we confirmed something like 58,000 matches in terms of people finding other people they cared about. And that was put through a set of homepages and information that we have. I'll move through some of this quite quickly. Our team is focused on lots of different tools, providing mobile places where people can visualize information that's relevant to them. And so this is a set of tools around mapping and visualization. And I mentioned an alerting project where we're consuming official alerts and information and then showing it to you when you search. This is not what you see when you search. This is just a pretty picture of all the weather and earthquake alerts in the US and around. But critically, when you go and search for that tsunami example, we're now able to show you the official alert and official information. So one of the asks for all of you is, let's get official information so that I can make use of it and show it to our millions of users. Right? And this, for people who are watching or who get the slides afterwards, is that there's a ton of research in the West, at least, about what matters in a warning. And the bottom one is the most relevant, which is milling, which is that it's social. Now, beneficiary communications has a long history of understanding exactly this point. But it's something that when we look at online tools, the social aspect, the Twitter and everything else, is the reinforcement of your message. Because just saying it once won't get the message across. And of course, none of this matters in places like Madagascar, where internet penetration is 1.6%, and our team really can't do much. Sorry? 3% now. Okay. 3 minutes. Okay. That's even better. So these are the Twitter pages from the head of the care office there, which was some of the only information coming out, but in an English language audience, but there wasn't much more in French or Malagasy, frankly. But it wasn't much use to people locally on the ground. And I'm just going to leave it at that, probably to say there's lots I'd like to talk about, but I'm really excited for the Ignite talks to happen because I love the format and I think it's a great place for learning what people's experiences are. And my ask from Google, if you like, and from my team, is that we need information to be able to share, and we need help for the places where we don't have reach and internet. And a commitment from Google and Google.org is that we are going to use all of the resources of Google, sort of brand, engineering, and where we have money, to try and make a difference in crisis situations. So thank you.
Great.
I did my time?
You were perfect. Thank you very much. And I'm under strict orders to keep you to time so that you can get to lunch, but so of course I'm going to ignore that. Because I'm sure there are lots and lots of questions, because you're really leading some of this thinking. So you're here during the course of the day, but any one quick burning question, or I may read the room wrong, but just quickly here, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I completely missed something, but Eric can go first. Yeah.
I was just going to ask, I'm a big fan of the public alerts.
Yeah.
You got a microphone.
But if billing is so important,
Yep.
How come you're not using any of the social user-generated data in there?
So just before you respond, let's get that question again on the microphone so we can capture it for the streaming.
Hello? Okay. So I'm a big fan of public alerts by Google. And you talked about milling being a really important part of it. How come there's no social or user-generated data in that system at all?
So we can have a longer product conversation, but very quickly, starting with authoritative data made the most sense because it turns out that the milling is confirmation often in terms of the psychology of emergency alerts. So the milling is not always used as the first piece, but as the confirmation and the repetition. And it is critical to have authoritative content still. But this is still being re-examined. So there's one piece. And ultimately, the amount of content in a 120, sort of in a text message or a Twitter message or a Google Plus message is not enough to generate the list of actionable information. What do I do? How do I stay safe, etc. That you want a bunch of information around to generate the context. So that was what we were able to try and put together. But the short answer is it's coming. We're working on it, etc.
And detail over lunch.
Yeah.
I know you want a final 3 seconds.
My final thing was, shamefully, as Google and as the host for you all here, I want to say thank you for coming. Thank you for allowing us to host you, because it's really exciting for me, given the journey I've been on, and for everybody here. But I really particularly wanted to thank sort of Rachel, Craig, and CDAC for moving ahead. But this wouldn't be possible without a lot of Googlers volunteering their time and effort and helping create the space and so forth. So I really want to thank Stephanie Johnson, who's been working really hard on this for some time, volunteering her time and sort of enabling it all to happen, because we've been able to do it without putting a huge amount of money in and just making use of our facilities. And Franz Lamy from our crisis response team and David McKenney from providing tech support up there. Thank you for volunteering time. And the other volunteers are helping you get in and out to the bathroom and to go smoke, etc., who, if you see them, wave at Scott, Pollyanne, Sarah, and Bronnie. So I'm sorry about the restrictions for the badges. It's just the way we operate.
Understood. Nigel, thank you very much indeed. Fantastic.